was like, let's have those conversations. Let's talk about it. Let's see how can we make it happen, because otherwise, again, just like our events that we don't offer the hybrid option, we don't make it accessible for more women to put their talent and their skills into the industry.
No, I'm in the wrong room. And I go, he goes, it's like the presidential suite. It's 5 bedrooms. I go, all right, you're in the wrong room.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Event Effect. My name is Marijn. I'm your host for today, and I'm joined with Anca and Brian. Anca, I know you are one of the most eccentric event professionals out there, especially on the AV and production side of things. You're not just doing AV and production, but also going around doing heavy weightlifting. It is very impressive, and I'm so glad you're here. Brian, besides AV and production, you're also very much in the motivational space of things. And I love to follow all the tips and tricks you have for people to take action. So with that, I'm here to welcome these two amazing event professionals. Before we get started, we like to ask you the question, how did you actually end up in the event industry? And today, specifically more, how did you end up in AV and production? Anca, maybe you would like to start this question off.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for the honor of being part of this unicornish AV episode, because it sounds like we're both kind of unicorns in our own right. And I'm excited to learn more about Brian as well. We got to connect a little bit before the episode started, so this is going to be a fun conversation. To your question, I don't know, how much time do you really have? So maybe I'll just give you the short version, okay? I started in actually radio as a radio DJ. This was during my high school and college years. When I moved to US right after college, I felt a little bit insecure about my accent at the time, and I didn't want to pursue the radio, lifestyle, even though, I was kind of passionate about it. Should have started my podcast back then, but it didn't happen. So the one thing that I remember really liking when I was in radio in the studio, aside from obviously having the radio show, and I had a few different radio shows at the time, was this little Mackie 1404, I think it was. It was like a little 4-channel little Mackie mixer that we used in the studio to mix our microphones, right? And I remember constantly playing with the EQ and changing my voice on the fly and doing all the things. And then I was like, okay, so that was kind of fun. I'm wondering what is it that I could learn more about when it comes to that, So I started pursuing a sound engineering degree that led me to work hands-on for a production company, Live Sound Reinforcement production company in LA. And that's where I learned a lot of things, and volunteering for a church, actually. I think before I even got in the door, my foot in the door, because technically I didn't have any AV experience, I started volunteering for a church in LA. And churches, let me tell you, houses of worship, they will always take anyone and be like, here's all things that you can do to help us, because, they always need help. And I wanted to volunteer, not in the kids department where most girls were volunteering, but I'm like, how can I get to do what the guys are doing? So teach me your ways, please. That's where I started. And once I built, I think in a couple of months time, because this was one of those venues, churches that was meeting in a venue, they would set up every single Sunday, from basically the first cable to the last cable, and then would strike again and do it all over again every weekend. So it was a really great experience to just start learning from the ground up and how to plug things in, how to start, EQing on the fly, how to set up the PA system. It wasn't just oh, here's how you move faders and then sound happens. It was everything. And I took that experience that I've started to apply actively, knowledge to, because I was also going to school into a sound program. And I went and I knocked at a few production houses doors, and I say, hey, I'll do anything, just get me in, I want to learn, And I remember my degree from Romania, because that's where I come originally from, was in computer science programming. And they're like, okay, so computer science, AV, like, what can we give you? How about you clean up and get our computers to work? I'm like, yay. So I got into like this production house to do maintenance on their computers. But then little did they know who they were dealing with, because I ended up being their inventory manager and just organizing everything. And that put me into another opportunity of growth to learn gear, like hands-on learn gear. What does this do? What does this do? Oh, how do we, like, where does this microphone belong to? Is this, dynamic microphone? Is it a condenser microphone? Should we put in this pile or should we put in that pile, right? So it was a lot of hands-on training and learning for sure. And everything else is just like, I guess, history. The takeaway here is, if I am to take it a little bit on the Brian motivational side, don't be afraid to put yourself into places of growth. And even though at times and many times it will feel uncomfortable at first, right? But if there's no stretching of your capacity, and if that doesn't feel uncomfortable, then probably you're not growing enough. And for me, that's something that I always challenge myself. Like, even with my fitness competition, where can I place myself again to just stretch my capacity just a little bit more? And my time is up.
I love that, like, think outside of the box approach and really push yourself to your limit, stretch your limits. And even though, like, probably when you got started even more, it was really a quote unquote men only industry, and you really put a solid foot on the ground and showed them that you're here. So I love really how you got started in the event industry. Brian, I can imagine for you, it probably has been different. Can you explain a little bit more
All right.
about your background?
Yeah. Well, Anca and I do share some common paths. I often say DJing is like an entry drug for the AV industry per se. And so I was a little different. I didn't DJ on the radio, but I was a wedding DJ. So a little electric slide, cha-cha slide, tossing the garter or the bouquet. But that's where I started. But I pivoted to the professional aspect of the industry. This is where I think it gets a little more interesting, as I joined the Marine Corps, and lo and behold, they actually have audiovisual technicians in the Marine Corps. I was a combat visual imagery specialist, and I used to quip that I actually could fix a VCR in combat. But no, the military, just like corporations and associations, organizations, need to train the troops, need to train their staff. And so they have robust audiovisual departments. And so when I signed up, and since I DJ'd in the past, I thought, well, I'll pick a technical media based field. And, I saw this job, combat visual imagery specialist. Now in the Marine Corps, there was a functional role for that. We actually knew how to fix photographic machinery for, back in the day, the jets would actually fly over enemy territory and take pictures with actual camera equipment. And so we learned how to repair what was essentially photo processing machines. And that was kind of like the core function. But our day job, when we weren't at war, and luckily I was in quite a while ago, it's almost been 30 years. I hate to even say that my career has spanned 30 years, because that means I'm getting old, Anca. But
we are always forever 25, Brian. That's going to always be the case.
Yeah, I mean, with Snapchat filters and all that, we should be able to stay young pretty good well into the future.
Mariah, you better have a filter on us. Just saying.
I'll make sure to do something in the editing.
Thank you.
But maybe that's a new question, is what's your favorite video filter in the future?
Love it, Brian. That's indeed
I'm trying to help, so...
Absolutely. No, I love that you actually both started in music. For me, I once back in the day also started in music, so I'm sure there's some connection there with music and the event industry. But really love that you both went into completely different paths, but kind of ended up in the same department of within the event industry. In that regards, you both must have a lot of different insights in terms of what is going on in the event industry, specifically more even on AV and production. Anca, maybe you can dive a bit more into what are the trends? What are you currently seeing is going on within AV and production?
Well, I think there's actually a lot of answers to that question. So it's not an easy answer because it depends which, I guess, angle you're looking at to determine what you're hoping for or the kind of trend you would like to see more often. Be the top trend. So in my world where I operate in right now, which is a lot of conferences and corporate events and fundraising galas, there's even within that, there's levels of different, subtleties of what happens in one area versus the other. Like a lot of the events that I used to do as virtual fundraising virtual events over 2020, 2021, have very much gone back to in person with very little thought into how digital have actually offered them a lot of revenue in, during COVID. Many of those events, they just want to get back to gathering and being together. On the other side, a lot of the conferences, the symposium that I do are 100% hybrid with different degrees of what that means, right? So what that means is that there's a lot of people that even though they used to attend this one large conference pre-COVID, they used to attend it in person. Now they know they have options and they leverage those options. So as event organizers, if you do not give your attendees options when it comes to where they can attend from, how do they attend, what kind of experience do they have, then you're taking away from your attendee list, basically, So you need to be very specific. What is the type of event you're planning to produce moving forward? And what kind of attendees do you want to actually attract? And what kind of experience do they have if they come? So those are the things that I see also from just a woman in a V. I see a lot more, I wouldn't say understanding of what that looks like, but more tolerance towards let's have a conversation of how do we bring more attention to the fact that women exist in the AV world, even though it feels like it's very male dominated. And we do have to cater to these women a little differently because we come as mothers more than just one event professional that is supposed to focus on this one event. There's a wholeness that comes to us that, in a situation where you just have a guy on a job and he's gone for like 2 weeks out of the month, a lot of the spouses, the sisters, the mothers behind this individual, supporting this individual to do all those things, they carry the weight. When I put myself on a job for 2 weeks, well, my family suffers. And it's just because that's the role that I also serve, right? So having that understanding of how do we cater to females that are really highly skilled, but the opportunity is not always there to be out on the job site and do all those things that they're passionate about. We have to have more conversation about, and that's where where really my passion comes from. Is like, let's have those conversations. Let's talk about it. Let's see how can we make it happen, because otherwise, again, just like our events that we don't offer the hybrid option, we don't make it accessible for more women to put their talent and their skills into the industry, because it's hard. Like it is hard to have to be in a position that requires long hours and out of your house, shows that will take you, places, but at the same time, it'll cost you something.
Absolutely. If I can kind of summarize it, it's not just inclusion in terms of towards your attendees and making sure it's accessible for everyone and everyone's needs, but also within the event industry
behind
itself, and including all the genders that are actually out there, and make sure that everyone can be a part of, in this case, AV and production.
Yep.
Brian, do you see kind of the similar trends? Do you also experience a lot regarding the hybrid and also the inclusion on events, or maybe you see some different trends?
I I'm feeling like I have very similar experience as Anca's had on many fronts. One thing I think is interesting, she brought up, obviously as a woman, she's going to bring up a discussion point about women. As a member of our executive leadership team at our organization, we're always looking at what our makeup of our organization is, and it's become more important in the last 10, 15 years. What I think is really neat for our organization is I can say I've been with the company a better part of 20 plus years. When I first started, there might have been 1 to 2 women at any given time in our organization in roles. Now we're hiring probably 30 to 40% of our new hires as women. That's a major shift for us as an organization. At one point, pre-pandemic, we were actually getting very close to 50% men and women, which is almost unheard of in the industry. And so, we like that. We think it's been a great move. It actually is, functionally well too, because there's more people available to work in the industry. Why is this just a male dominated industry? It doesn't need to be that way. Nor does it, inclusivity on all fronts. And I wanted to touch on, I think where, one of the trends I'm seeing when it comes functionally to events, I like Anca's reference to the nuance of different divisions or different types of events is, I think that inclusivity on a functional level, are we providing, sign language? Are we providing captioning, or what type of captioning are we providing? Are we providing, one of my favorite event profs, Brant Kruger, calls it craptioning, which is the AI captioning is always not as good. So are you spending that extra money to bring in a live captioner? And it's no longer optional in an event. In fact, it's a legal issue for a lot of organizations. Unfortunately, that's what's driving a lot of it. A lot of corporations are saying we have to provide this. Definitely universities. It's a standard. Almost any university contract I receive, it asks me about what my ability are as it relates to ADA compliance and providing that. And so I think as event professionals, there's a lot of room for growth in that space in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's coming quicker than we knew. But the great news is the technology is there. There's no reason why you can't provide an inclusive event environment that provides the captioning, provides sign language, possibly hearing assist devices in live settings. I think all that stuff's been underutilized and put to the wayside for many years. And so I think, I feel good about where the industry's headed. I think we got a great moral compass. We want to do what's right. And I think our end clients are catching up to what I think as event professionals, we want to do the right thing. Maybe our clients don't want to spend the money on it. And I think the end clients are catching up to our morals as event professionals, that we have to provide this inclusive outcome to the attendees. So in terms of the hybrid experience, yes, I call it the rebound. I don't think hybrid or virtual is going away. I do think we had just a high density because we didn't have any other options. And so we got too much of it. And so people need a break. But I think professionals will say, how do I repackage this? How do I make this effective for the new world where I don't have a captive audience? It was easy to be successful in virtual when people were stuck at home and that was their only way to connect. Now people have options. And so you need to get creative. You need to provide a great product. And so I think that's what's going to be the differentiation point over the next 3 to 5 years is how well you pivot. That ugly word, pivot. Are we allowed to use that word anymore, or have we retired it? What do you think?
Here you're definitely allowed to use it.
Okay. So a new pivot, and that's honing our skills as virtual and hybrid event profs, having a much better product to offer than just a captive audience. So that's where I see things headed. I think Anca and I have had very similar kind of experiences from what she shared as what we're experiencing as well.
Yeah. And I feel there's even like almost like an extra level added to that, where in the next few years, I mean, there's definitely a lot of conversation about the metaverse. What does that look like? How is that going to impact our events? And how can we take advantage of this new technology trend, but also like really the next level of of events taken into that space. And I'm curious, honestly, to see how long will it take the event industry to embrace that, because I mean it's been embraced in other industries already, like just commerce, fashion. They're definitely taking advantage of it. But for us, I feel like we're just a little slow, and unless we're pushed into a corner, like the pandemic has pushed us into a virtual and technology, and out of that have stemmed all the awareness of how well we've done our events this way for a while, and we've it was so much easier to provide captioning and to provide ASL. How do we do that now in person? Like regardless if you have a virtual or not event, you should still consider to include those accessibility points that Brian was just making to your in-person event. I remember doing quite a few events in Portland, Oregon, and there is a strategic partnership that I have with one of the organizations there that has been using ASL interpretation on stage for live events 5 years before COVID was even like, coming about, and that became more of a awareness, like how do we make this program accessible to everyone that's got eyes on screen. And that's something that doesn't take, it doesn't require to change the format. It just requires awareness that you should be, thinking about some of the audience that it's joining your event, and how do you make it accessible for them in person or not.
I really love that addition. And I think in general, inclusivity, accessibility, kind of hybrid, and making sure you cater to all the audiences is what's really going on in the event industry right now, not only from an AV and production perspective, but it's something I hear quite a lot. In that regards, maybe Anca, you can share a bit more of what you experience in real life right now. Like, can you name a real life experience of what you're currently experiencing within AV and event production, something you encountered yourself?
I feel like me and everyone else right now in the event planning and event production world are experiencing shorter and tighter than life deadlines and timelines. I feel like I'm constantly running from one event into the next on a very short timeline, and that just has shortened not just the pre-event pre-planning time, which makes things just a little bit more, I would say, stressful, or not necessarily stressful. It's always like there's always one extra thing that you have to do that before you have more time to allocate to. And just last week I was the week prior to last week, actually, I had a week-long conference in Portland, Oregon, and I was running into a 3-day conference here locally where I'm at based. And my time to work on either one of those was literally like either late nights or weekends. So I have very little time in between to just, think about, okay, so I just work 18 hours every single day during this week. And now I'm just pushing myself into this other week, and I have not had a break. And I need to somehow make this sustainable for myself, from a wellness point of view. And how can I make that without constantly just running like like with my pants on fire, So there's a little bit of that. I think there's a season for it as well. And I do happen to work really well under pressure. And sometimes I feel like there's an extra level of creativity that kicks in when you're like on a really tight deadline and you're under pressure, but it is not sustainable in the long term. That's the secret. Like, sure, you can pull that off on an event or another event or a project, right? But to try to work at that like high intense level and intensity for a long time, it's not sustainable. So that's what I'm seeing. That's where my life experience is right now. And I'm just trying to create more room in my schedule, more bandwidth in my overall, event schedule, which for me right now, what it means is like to get help wherever I can. If that means, as a business owner, like bookkeeping, virtual assistant here, assistant there, marketing, PR, just I'm used to doing it all because I have a little bit of like that, like need to control things, but is it necessary unless I'm planning to like put myself in the grave sooner than later, So that's where I'm at. Like I need to be able to allocate and delegate at a level in which I have not had the need before, just because of how the industry has changed and how little time we have in between events and how little time we have to actually plan. And then there's always that last minute client that comes, oh, we just booked our venue, or we just thought about this event and we need you. I'm like, really? You just thought about needing AV for your event like this week, and your event is next week. Like, come on, let's be honest. So bringing ourselves into the conversation earlier will make it less stressful on our end, but here we are.
Yeah, very, very good point. I like also the delegate wherever you can, and maybe in the worst case, even eliminate and say, yeah, I'm very sorry, but that's not going to fit in my schedule because we're here for the long term and I want to organize a lot of successful events for the foreseeable future and not end up burned out. Brian, can you share some of your experiences that you experience right now in real life within the AV and production side of things?
Yeah. Were you reading my journal, Anca? It sounds like we're going through the same thing right now. The industry has definitely had a surge in demand and very short time windows. In fact, I've had 3 major load-ins over the last 3 weeks. Only one of them was planned more than a month out at this point. And so that's great news. Obviously, it's been a feast or famine kind of world for many of us. And, the feast does present its challenge, but it does give us an opportunity. What I think is going to happen over the next few years in the industry is, the idea that you're going to have a vendor or a provider available at a drop of a hat are not going to be the case. I think planners are going to have to lock in their resources earlier. I think for the moment, providers are going to work with, or we're going to work with the planners to execute because we've all had this gap. But they're going to have to settle into something that makes sense. It's not sustainable. A lot of people are tired. They've already been working on limited staffing through the pandemic. A lot of companies downsize. We're still not back to full staffing levels. So people are tired, and it's gonna take a different path. We as a company have, I think one of the shifts is saying no to more stuff, more things. You don't have to say yes to everything that crosses your plate. We're being more focused. I think companies are going to become more boutique and say, this is my part of the business. This is what I do. We don't do everything. I do really good fundraising events. I do really good trade show events. I do really good corporate town halls or corporate product launches. I think to be successful, the more you can go niche, however you say it, the better your success, because you're not going to be reinventing, the wheel every event. So, I know we all are very motivated here on this call, and we like to do new things and try out new things, but to be successful, you are going to have to come up with some kind of models. And I'm going to use an example that I like is I was talking with a hotelier, and the F&B department, the way they're doing their menus in the hotel is that they're saying Mondays we offer this particular product, Tuesdays we offer this menu, and Wednesday, and we're talking on the banquet side, which typically you would order whatever you want off the menu. Well, the idea is that supply chain is tight. I can't guarantee I can get fish on Mondays, so let's schedule all of our fish orders on Monday, all of our beef orders on Tuesday. I think AV and production is going to have some similar items. Like if you don't book more than 90 days out, I won't be able to do this event. And so how to standardize your approach, how to come up with, this is what I can do for you. Would you like a 2-camera shoot, 2 screens, 2 downstage monitors? Yes, I can do that, but I can't do a widescreen event for you today because that will take too much creative production time to be able to execute that in under 2 weeks.
However, and qualified labor,
standards,
I was just running into that problem they just mentioned while I was doing this week-long conference where the talk was, okay, we're just going to do in-person production like we have pre-COVID. And then 3 days before the event, the client is like, well, we actually have some people that can't join anymore. Can we just do add virtual to that? I'm like, there is a workflow and there is gear and there's people involved in changing the plan just like that, plus budget too. You can't just order your chicken on a Tuesday, like you said, when that's the beef day anymore. So you have to do a little bit more planning. Maybe in the past, we have actually been way more resourceful and capable of providing last minute changes. But for me in that situation, I basically had to bring my whole rig, fly it in a Pelican case into a different city to be able to do streaming and provide streaming, because I have had no resources on the ground because everybody was flat out booked. I don't have people. So that just means now I'm taking myself and putting in myself in multiple roles to do on this event, right? Which I didn't necessarily plan for. It's not that I'm not capable, but I'm going to stretch myself at a level that my next event is going to suffer because now I'm that tired because I didn't have time to rest. I was editing at night the footage that we were recording during the day, and then we would start all over again at 6 a.m., right? So there's a little bit of understanding that we're going to all have to be able to create around the fact that yes, those deadlines and those timelines are very short right now, but we're going to start to become very choosy on the production side as well. And we're going to start saying no more often once things start to sort of settle into place.
Excellent. I'm pro the no. I'm going to go ahead and say that. That's been my favorite.
Love it.
It's been my favorite change in the industry over the last I've turned down more business in the last year than I've ever turned down in my entire career. And, that's actually refreshing to say we're going to do what's right for us versus just take everything on. And your employees will respond to that as well because you're not driving them and grinding them week in and week out. So it's a two-pronged approach.
I think it's a win-win for everyone because you get to work with only the clients that you know are a great fit for you in terms of the event, but also in terms of the quote-unquote restrictions or obligations that you have to work with. Not too short of a deadline because I can imagine that, man, 3 days or a week up front, what are people expecting? With that said, I think those are kind of already more or less horror stories where you have to really change the whole thing.
Well, there's a happy ending. There's a silver lining to that, Mayorhead. The events are not great. On the fly, you can still make magic because that's what we do. That's why we're unicorns, right? But I don't know if I want to do that every single week of my life or weekend because then the magic spark, it's gonna run out eventually.
Absolutely. Let alone imagine you as a unicorn kind of losing your horn.
Oh no,
we're only just a horse, right?
Not good.
We cannot have that.
Nope.
But I can really imagine how many horror, but also maybe funny stories you must have experienced throughout the years in AV and production. I know AV and production peeps are on point when it goes to humor and laughing about whatever went wrong, but that they were eventually able to fix. Anca, maybe you can share a highlight of your career in terms of either a horror or a funny story.
I feel like I definitely have funny stories. Right now, I'm running short of something that would come to mind, not because I'm not a funny person. Actually, I promise. But when I'm on a job site, most of the times I feel like I fall into this very focused mode where it's just checking list, crossing things off the list and making sure that everything is well. And a lot of the fun stuff that happens behind the scenes becomes more of a, I don't know, it should be forefront, but in many ways, it becomes more of a second thought. And only afterwards you have the time to actually, relax and be okay, that was actually kind of funny, Right now, nothing comes to mind. And again, do not take it as you're not a fun person. I am a fun person. Just right now, I can't think of anything.
No
You
problem
put
at
me
all.
on the
No
on the
problem at all.
spot. So maybe if Brian goes next, and I'll have a little
course.
bit of time to process, maybe I'll come up with something. If not,
Of
I'll just
course.
have to
Brian,
be an add-on.
We'll make sure to have it added if for whatever reason you don't come up with it. But Brian, for you, maybe something funny you experienced, or maybe like something that you were like, wow, this is more or less the end of the world right now.
Now, what if all my funny stories happened in Vegas? I mean, am I allowed to tell them or what? So,
Oh, I'm ready to
depends.
listen.
well, this one happened in Phoenix, and it's not quite. It's AV related on the sense of getting there. We often work with a lot of high end corporations, pharmas who have some pretty nice budgets, and so when we're traveling with our clients. Sometimes we don't always stay in the host hotel, but this particular pharma was really good about ensuring that we stayed on site. And so, we were at this particular resort, and over the years when my techs would call and say, Brian, I think they put me in the wrong room because it would be like a suite or whatever, and I'd be like, no, it's fine. This is just what it's like when we're traveling with the pharma, and enjoy it while you can. And so this one day, one of my techs called me. He's like, Brian, I'm in the wrong room. And I go, no, you're fine. He goes, no, I'm in the wrong room. And he goes, it's like the presidential suite. It's 5 bedrooms. I go, all right, you're in the wrong room. Okay. Well, it ends up my technician had the same full name as the president of this division we were doing the event. So he was checking into the president's room. And so, yes, he was in the wrong room.
That is hilarious. That's fine.
And
okay,
so
you should have just keep it, man. Keep it. This is your one opportunity to experience this.
Just make him kick you out. What can I say?
Exactly. Okay, I guess I can think of just something super small. It's not as funny as that, but during one of the conferences that I was working with, a slew of presenters and speakers, and they all had presentations that, there was a clear deadline to turn it in, and obviously try to keep to that deadline when you have about 100 presenters and they're all PhDs and they all have just one more extra thing to add to their presentation or their abstract. And I had, it was like the day before this one presenter was about to go on stage and present. And this was, again, a hybrid setup. So I needed to have their content so I can preload it in my streaming machine and have it, qualified to make sure it's all ready to go. The fonts are fine. I mean, all the graphics work that goes behind the scenes that if you're a speaker and if you don't know what all that entails, you do need to listen to my latest podcast episode in which I interview a graphic operator. She's extraordinary on giving tips, not just for the presenters, but also for technicians on how can you best set yourself for success. So in this situation, I had this one presenter that I kid you not, in a span of 2 hours, she sent me 8 different files that were all called final. At this point, I'm like, dude, you have used all your finals for today. You are not allowed to use any more finals for this presentation because I'm calling it quits. Like, you need to stop. It wasn't even like version 1, version 2, version 3. And she kept uploading it. Like literally in a span of 2 hours, she had 8 different versions of a final presentation. At this point, I'm like, I am out of weeds. I don't know which one is final anymore because they all sound so very final.
At a certain point, she probably couldn't even add any finals to the title.
It was that name of that presentation became like this miles long. I'm like, I need to cut the naming down as well, the naming convention, which should be one as well. But I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, who came up with this? I don't understand.
Speakers are very notorious for having a billion different versions.
And I bet the file is named after the conference without their name in it either.
Right? Like no name, no date, no reference to your session, no reference to the name that you're presenting, and try to sort that out if you have like about 100 of those one after another. And those were like 15-minute block presentations. So you had no break for errors because you're just cutting into the next speaker's time. So you better be on point. You know, when you start your time, the clock starts and the clock ends. So no time for like troubleshooting, you know.
Go. I can definitely relate to that example, actually.
So we should make a rule like no final naming convention in our files, please.
Absolutely.
We only go up to final. That's it. That's it. That's where we end.
It's the final countdown. That's like the last title we'll add. No, I really love your stories, your experience, the trends you've shared. Because we're kind of running on the end of this episode, I would like to ask both of you if you had to tell or share anything with event professionals in general right now, from your perspective in the industry, a tip you would like to give them, or just in general, something nice to say to event professionals, whatever you like. What would be the one thing you would like to tell event professionals right now? Anca?
I'm going to try to keep it short, I promise. Bring us into the conversation earlier than you think is necessary, because you're not wasting our time. You're actually only giving us opportunities to be more creative and give you more resources and more options than you think you need. Again, let us be the professionals that we are, but bring us into the conversation. That's all I've got to say. Bring us in.
I love it. Short, straight to the point, but very, very true. Brian, what would your one thing be?
Yeah, I think where I see the industry going is that we get focused on our event partners. I think we've been very focused on the attendee, the presenters. It's time to focus on the back of house, the event staff, all the partners in the background. I think that's the trend of the next 4 to 5 years, is taking care of ourselves first so that we can take care of everybody else. And so that's what I have for you. Let's take care of us. It's our turn.
Take it home, Brian. Take it home. There you go.
Exactly. No, very true. We have to take care of ourselves, especially as we mentioned, like you want to be here for a longer period of time and you want to always consistently get that high quality. You have to take care of yourself and the industry in general.
All I'm saying, Ryan, this is another conversation altogether, how we actually strategically do that and how do we get to take care of ourselves, especially in a demanding industry such as event productions. And I would love to hear where that conversation goes.
I would love to have a follow-up on this one. For now, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I want to thank both of you very much for all the very valuable insights you got to share with the event industry. I'm super happy that you got to be together here and got to know each other a little bit better as well. And hopefully the rest of our listeners also got to know you a lot better. With that, thank you all, especially the listeners, for tuning in, being part of the Event Effect. The next episode will be live in 2 weeks on Wednesday from now. And with that, I'm looking forward to having you.
Thank you so much for having us.